It all started on a regular evening, one of those rare moments when everything seemed calm. I was sitting in my room, scrolling through my phone, catching up on the world's latest news. The usual stories about politics, global events, and celebrity gossip filled my feed. I didn't expect anything unusual to happen. But then, the sky outside my window began to change. Before we dive into the exciting journey of the aliens locked down the Earth under their control, I have a humble request. If you enjoy the content, please consider supporting my channel by subscribing. Your support means a lot to me, and I promise to continue working hard to bring you even more thrilling stories in the future. I truly appreciate each and every one of you who believes in my hard work and dedication. Now, let's begin the adventure. It was subtle at first, just a darkening of the clouds, but within minutes they started to swirl, twisting and turning in ways that defied nature. I leaned closer to the window, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The wind picked up, and an odd hum filled the air, vibrating through the walls of my house. It wasn't like any storm I had ever heard. It was low, constant, and somehow unnatural. At first, I thought it might just be a storm forming, something we hadn't expected. But when I turned to look at my phone again, I saw breaking news flashing across the screen. The headline was short and chilling: strange objects appear in the sky over major cities worldwide. The message felt surreal, but as I read further, my heart sank. What the world was witnessing was far beyond anything I could have imagined. Reports were coming in from all over the globe, massive, dark shapes hovering over cities like New York, London, Beijing, and even small towns in remote regions. Some people described seeing flying crafts with a mechanical look, while others said they could barely see anything at all through the dense fog that had rolled in. The sky was an ominous mix of gray and purple, and the air felt heavy, as if the world was holding its breath. As the night wore on, the news got worse. Social media exploded with confusion and fear. Videos showed strange lights moving across the sky, too fast for planes, too controlled to be anything natural. Some people speculated about alien visitors, while others said it was some sort of military experiment gone wrong. But there was one thing everyone agreed on: this wasn't a coincidence. Something monumental was happening. The first message from them came in the early hours of the morning. It wasn't a broadcast, it was more of a sudden, overwhelming presence. Every screen in the world, from televisions to phones to radios, began to emit a strange static. Then a voice, a calm, chilling voice, cut through the noise, speaking in perfect English. "We are the Zhorans," it said, "and Earth is now under our control." I froze. The voice was cold, distant, and somehow knowing. It wasn't threatening at first, just matter of fact, as if this was the inevitable truth. The message repeated itself in several languages, each more chilling than the last. The aliens weren't asking permission. They weren't negotiating. They were simply declaring their dominance, as if humanity had no choice but to accept it. I remember looking at the sky outside again, the same strange clouds swirling above, and I wondered if this was really happening. Could it be a hoax? Could this all be some kind of joke, a worldwide conspiracy? But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The world had just changed forever. People started to panic. The government tried to calm everyone down, but it was clear they didn't know how to respond. The military was on high alert, but no one knew what to do against something like this. The air was thick with uncertainty, and fear started to spread faster than the news itself. The aliens had already shown their power, but what was their purpose? What did they want from us? I couldn't stop thinking about that voice, that calm yet terrifying tone. Earth is now under our control. What did that really mean for us? Would we fight or would we surrender? The questions piled up and the answers seemed farther out of reach than ever before. The days following the alien arrival were like something out of a nightmare. The initial shock had worn off, but the reality of our situation began to sink in. The world, once filled with the noise of everyday life, was now eerily quiet. People stayed indoors, glued to their screens, waiting for any sign that things would go back to normal. But that never came. Instead, it felt as though the aliens were tightening their grip on Earth with every passing hour. The lockdowns began almost immediately. Major cities were surrounded by an invisible force, as though the sky itself was pressing down on us. The Zhorans had somehow disrupted all communication systems, phones, internet, even radio broadcasts. It was as if they had thrown a blanket over the planet, cutting off the flow of information. People tried to go outside, but armed drones flew overhead, scanning for any signs of resistance. The message was clear: stay inside, stay silent, or face the consequences. I remember the first time I stepped outside after the lockdown. The streets, which should have been bustling with life, were almost completely deserted. The air was thick with tension, and a strange silence had fallen over everything. The usual sounds of cars, birds, and distant chatter were replaced by an oppressive quiet. The only noise was the occasional hum of a Zhoran drone flying overhead, its mechanical whine a constant reminder that we were being watched. People moved quickly, their heads down, avoiding any unnecessary attention. It was like living in a city under siege, with no clear enemy to fight. At first, many people thought it was some kind of mistake, a misunderstanding. Surely this couldn't be happening, right? The world had survived countless disasters, from natural calamities to political crises. Surely we could handle this. But as the days went on, it became clear that this wasn't just a passing threat. The Zhorans weren't here for negotiations or to simply observe us. They had taken full control, and Earth was now their domain. The world governments, at least what was left of them, tried to organize a response. But their efforts were futile. The Zhorans had advanced technology beyond anything we could comprehend. Their ships hovered silently above us, watching, waiting. Any attempts to retaliate were swiftly crushed. The military sent jets into the sky, only for them to be shot down by an unseen force. Tanks and armored vehicles rolled into the streets, but they were no match for the Zhorans' overwhelming power. Each attempt to fight back ended in failure. The world's leaders were helpless, and their words of resistance felt hollow against the reality of our situation. In the midst of all this, I tried to keep a sense of normalcy. I went to work, but the office was empty, like the rest of the world. It was as if humanity had become a ghost, too frightened to move, too stunned to fight. But that wasn't the case for everyone. Some people began to question, began to organize. Whispers of resistance spread through the shadows, through encrypted messages and secret meetings. There were still those who believed that humanity could stand up, that we could take back control. But those voices were drowned out by the overwhelming silence of the world around us. I found myself caught between fear and hope. The aliens' power was undeniable, and their presence was everywhere. But there was a small, quiet part of me that refused to believe that Earth was lost forever. Maybe we had been defeated in the first battle, but the war wasn't over yet. The Zhorans had underestimated humanity's will to survive, and that was something I was determined to believe. But for now, all I could do was watch, wait, and pray that the spark of resistance would grow. As the weeks went by, the world settled into a grim new normal. The Zhorans had established their control over everything, and the daily routine of human life had ceased to exist. People stayed inside, and the streets were virtually empty. The feeling of being trapped, of being watched at every turn, was suffocating. There was no communication, no news, no updates, just a deep, oppressive silence. It felt like the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the stillness. But there was no sign of that. Yet, amid this bleakness, something began to stir. In the shadows, small groups of people were beginning to gather, organizing themselves in secret, hoping against hope that they could resist the aliens and find a way to fight back. The first whispers of a resistance were timid and fleeting, shared in hushed voices behind closed doors. But as time passed, the whispers grew louder. People were starting to realize that, although the Zhorans were powerful, they weren't invincible. And maybe, just maybe, humanity could find a way to strike back. I was one of those people who had heard the rumors and felt the stirring of defiance in my heart. It wasn't easy to make contact with others in the current climate. Every communication channel was blocked. Every piece of technology had been either disabled or hijacked by the Zhorans. But there were still ways to communicate in secret. We used old methods, writing on scraps of paper, passing messages through underground networks, meeting in dark corners of abandoned buildings. The fear of being caught was ever present, but so was the growing sense that we had nothing left to lose. I joined one of these resistance groups, made up of ordinary people who had once been civilians, teachers, workers, students, and even former soldiers. We met in secret locations, always on the move, always looking over our shoulders. The group was led by a former military officer, a man named Darius. He was smart, tough, and resourceful, and it was his leadership that gave us hope. His plans were clear and pragmatic: gather information, disrupt the Zhorans' technology, and find ways to reach other resistance groups scattered around the world. It wasn't much, but it was something. For the first time in weeks, we had a purpose. The more we learned about the Zhorans, the more we understood the scope of their power. Their ships were not only massive, but had technology far beyond anything humanity could even imagine. They could manipulate the atmosphere, bend the very air to their will. Their drones were everywhere, scanning for any sign of rebellion. They had even begun to install surveillance systems in every city, turning buildings into eyes that watched our every move. The weight of it all was staggering. But we also knew that the Zhorans had weaknesses. They weren't invulnerable. They had made mistakes, and they had underestimations that we could exploit. One of the first things we learned from our covert missions was that the Zhorans' communications network was not as invincible as it seemed. They had a central system that controlled most of their operations on Earth. If we could get inside, if we could figure out how to disrupt it, we could strike a blow against them. It was risky, but it was our best chance. We knew it was only a matter of time before the Zhorans would begin to systematically eliminate anyone they saw as a threat. Our best option was to move fast, disrupt their plans, and spread the message that humanity would not bow down so easily. The group trained in secret, working on how to evade the drones, how to sabotage Zhoran technology, and how to gather intelligence without getting caught. We used whatever tools we could find, learning how to fight with what we had. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't easy, but every small victory, every piece of information we gathered, felt like a small rebellion against the Zhorans. They had tried to break us, to isolate us, but we were finding ways to fight back. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. As the days passed, we felt a growing sense of solidarity among us. We were no longer just a group of frightened individuals trying to survive. We were a resistance. We had a common goal, a reason to fight, and more importantly, we had hope. It wasn't a guarantee that we would win, but it was something. And in a world where everything seemed lost, hope was the most powerful weapon we had. The Zhorans might control the skies, but they couldn't control our spirit. And as long as we held on to that, we still had a chance. As we gathered more information and honed our strategies, the growing threat of the Zhorans became more apparent. Our small acts of defiance, though promising, seemed like nothing compared to the overwhelming power they wielded. The Zhorans weren't just invaders, they were conquerors, methodical and efficient in everything they did. Their ships hovered above the cities, silent and imposing, casting a shadow over the world. Their technology was unlike anything we had ever seen, capable of controlling not just the environment but every aspect of our daily lives. We soon learned more about their leader Zaltor. The name itself sent a chill down my spine. He was said to be the mastermind behind the invasion, the one who had planned and orchestrated the entire operation. But it wasn't just his military strategy that made him terrifying. It was his mind. Zaltor wasn't just a brute force, he was an intellect, a tactician who had studied humanity with an unnerving precision. He understood our strengths and, more dangerously, our weaknesses. The more we learned about Zaltor, the clearer it became that he wasn't here just to invade. He wasn't just after the resources of Earth or the power that came with ruling over a new world. His goal was to break humanity's spirit. It wasn't enough for him to conquer us, he wanted to prove that no species, no matter how resilient, could stand against the Zhorans. His mission was personal. He saw Earth and its people as nothing more than a challenge, a puzzle to be solved and dominated. Every action, every move he made, was calculated to erode our will to resist. We learned that Zaltor was the highest-ranking Zhoran officer in this sector, a position he had earned through ruthless efficiency. His rise to power had been swift, built on his ability to outthink and outmaneuver every opponent he faced. But what truly made him dangerous was his understanding of human psychology. He knew how to push us to the edge, how to make us doubt ourselves, and how to sow division among us. His methods weren't just military, they were psychological. He used fear as a weapon, and it was working. For weeks we lived in the shadow of his presence, never knowing when the next attack would come or what he would do next. It felt as if the Zhorans were always one step ahead of us. They controlled the air, the communications, and the very flow of information. There was no place we could hide, no place where we could feel safe. And yet, despite the overwhelming odds, we continued to push forward. There were days when I felt like giving up, when the weight of everything seemed too much to bear. But then I would think of Zaltor, of his twisted belief that he could break humanity, and I would feel a spark of defiance ignite within me. He might have underestimated us, but that was his mistake. I learned that Zaltor's ultimate goal was to shatter the human spirit, to turn Earth into a colony of despair. He didn't just want us to submit, he wanted us to accept our defeat with resignation, to lose all hope and fall into servitude. But what he didn't account for was the strength that came from our unity. The Zhorans had underestimated one thing: human resilience. We weren't just fighting for survival, we were fighting for our right to live freely, to refuse to be broken. And that would be our strength, the one thing that Zaltor couldn't control. The more I thought about Zaltor and his cruel intentions, the more determined I became. We had to stop him. If we didn't, Earth would become just another trophy in his quest for domination. We had to find a way to defeat him, to show him that humanity would never bow to an alien invader. We couldn't just resist, we had to win. The resistance had already begun, and though we were small, our resolve was unbreakable. Zaltor had made a dangerous mistake. He had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to fight back, and to never give up. That would be his downfall. The resistance was growing, but so was the tension. We knew our time was limited. The Zhorans were tightening their grip, and every day brought new signs that they were preparing for something much worse. The drones became more frequent, and their patrols in the cities were more intense. The Zhoran forces seemed to know exactly where we were, and it was only a matter of time before they would strike. We had to act quickly. Every plan we made, every move we took, felt like a gamble. Darius, the leader of our group, had been working tirelessly to decipher the patterns of the Zhorans' operations. We knew that their central control system, their nerve center, was located in one of the largest cities, a place we had come to know as the heart of the invasion. It was where they communicated with all their forces, where they kept their most advanced technologies. It was also where Zaltor himself operated from. If we could infiltrate that place, we could take out their communications, disrupt their control systems, and send a powerful message: Earth wasn't done fighting. We had no illusions about the danger we were about to face. The heart of the invasion was a fortress, heavily guarded and surrounded by Zhoran technology. Their security measures were unlike anything we had seen. But we had a plan. It was risky, and the odds of success were slim, but it was the only option we had. The plan involved a multi-pronged approach. One team would create a distraction to draw attention away from the heart of the city, while another would sneak into the heart of Zhoran operations. If everything went according to plan, we could disable their communications and take out their most crucial systems. But it wasn't going to be easy. On the day of the operation, the atmosphere felt thick with anticipation. Everyone in the group knew the risks, but we had come too far to turn back now. We gathered in our hidden base, a small abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The sounds of distant drones buzzing in the air reminded us that we weren't alone, but for the first time in weeks, there was something else in the air: hope. It was fragile, but it was there. We split into two groups. Darius led the team that would create the diversion. They had to get the attention of the Zhoran forces, draw their fire, and make sure that the main group could slip into the heart of the city unnoticed. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was the best we could come up with. My team, led by me, would focus on infiltrating the Zhoran command center, using the chaos created by Darius's team as cover. As we moved toward the city, the weight of what we were about to do pressed down on me. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, feel the sweat dripping down my back. The closer we got, the more nervous I became. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about sending a message to the Zhorans that they could not control us. I didn't know if we would succeed or fail, but I knew we had to try. If we didn't, humanity would remain under the thumb of the Zhorans forever. We reached the outskirts of the city without incident, avoiding detection as we moved through the shadows. The Zhoran forces were more concentrated toward the center, as expected. That gave us a small window of opportunity. As we crept through the deserted streets, I couldn't help but feel like we were intruders in our own world, like the very ground beneath our feet no longer belonged to us. But then I remembered why we were here, and I pushed the thoughts away. We had to keep moving. Everything went according to plan at first. The distraction team managed to create enough chaos to draw the Zhorans' attention, and my team infiltrated the city's heart. We reached the entrance of their control center, where the Zhorans had set up an impenetrable barrier. Our mission was clear: get inside, destroy their communication system, and get out before they could react. It was risky, but there was no turning back now. The moment we entered the compound, I could feel the tension building. Every second counted. The Zhorans weren't just watching for resistance, they were anticipating it. Inside, the walls were lined with strange, glowing technology. It felt alien, like we were in a place that had never been designed for humans, but we had no choice. We moved quickly, disabling the security systems one by one. The closer we got to the heart of their control center, the more difficult it became. Zhoran guards patrolled the halls, but we had learned to avoid detection. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. We reached the central command room, where a massive holographic map of the world displayed the Zhorans' global operations. It was terrifying to see the extent of their control, but now we had to destroy it. Using the explosives we had brought, we set charges around the communication array. As I looked around, I realized something: we were making history. We weren't just fighting for survival. We were fighting to prove that the human spirit could never be crushed. The day we launched our attack felt like the end, and yet, it was only the beginning. It had taken us months to gather the courage, the resources, and the intelligence we needed to strike back. We knew the Zhorans would be expecting us, that they would have anticipated every move we made. But we had no choice. This was our final chance, and if we failed, humanity's last hope would be gone forever. We had spent weeks infiltrating their controlled zones, slowly learning how to bypass their security systems, how to move undetected. Each step was a calculated risk, and every successful mission gave us a glimmer of hope. But hope alone wouldn't win this war. We needed action. The device we had found, the one that could disrupt the Zhorans' communication network, was our only shot at survival. It was a delicate operation. The device was buried deep within a heavily guarded Zhoran facility, far beyond the reach of any normal human. We had to reach it, activate it, and send a signal to the rest of the resistance. That was our plan. As we approached the facility, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. The streets were eerily silent, a sharp contrast to the chaos that had defined our world for the past few months. We were moving under the cover of darkness, our faces covered, blending in with the shadows. The Zhorans had a tight grip on the city, and their patrols were everywhere. The drones circled above us, scanning for any sign of movement. Every corner was a potential trap, every step a risk we had to take. We had to be swift, precise, and most of all, silent. The facility loomed ahead, a monolithic structure made of dark metal and alien architecture. It was imposing, a symbol of the Zhorans' control over our world. As we neared the entrance, we split into smaller groups, each one tasked with disabling different security measures. The air felt thick with tension, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. My eyes darted around constantly, checking for signs of movement, but the streets remained still. Our group reached the outer wall of the facility, where a series of reinforced doors blocked the way. The next few minutes felt like hours. We had to crack a complex security code to gain entry, and even the slightest mistake would alert the Zhorans to our presence. My fingers flew across the keypad, inputting the sequence as quickly as I could. I could hear the faint hum of the Zhoran technology on the other side of the door. the sound of the enemy closing in. Every second felt like an eternity, but finally the door clicked open. We were in. Inside, the facility was a maze of cold, sterile corridors, lit only by the dim glow of alien lights. There was no sign of the Zhorans yet, but we knew they were close. The plan had been simple: get to the device, activate it, and get out. But as we moved deeper into the facility, things started to go wrong. We encountered more security measures than we had anticipated: laser grids, motion sensors, and automated defense systems. It became clear that the Zhorans had been preparing for an attack like ours for a long time. We had to move quickly, bypassing each obstacle with precision. The air grew heavy with the weight of our mission, and I couldn't help but feel the pressure mounting. We finally reached the control room where the device was held, and I could see it, an intricate piece of alien technology, pulsing with a soft blue light. The device was protected by a force field, and I could hear the faint buzzing of an alarm system in the background. Time was running out. We had no choice but to act. One of our team members, a former engineer, worked quickly to disable the force field. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his hands trembling slightly as he manipulated the alien technology. Every second felt like a lifetime. Finally, with a quiet click, the force field deactivated. The device was within reach. As I moved forward to activate it, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. We were running out of time. The Zhorans had discovered us. The final moments were a blur. We activated the device, but before we could react, alarms blared and the facility went into lockdown. The Zhorans had us cornered. We fought with everything we had, using everything we'd learned from our time in hiding. The battle was brutal, the odds overwhelming, but we managed to hold our ground long enough for the device to send a signal to the rest of the resistance. It was a small victory, but it was enough to keep the fight alive. As we made our escape, the weight of what we had accomplished sank in. We had disrupted the Zhorans' communication, sent a message to the resistance, and given humanity a fighting chance. But the war was far from over. We had won this battle, but the final stand was still ahead. The final battle was unlike anything I could have imagined. The stakes had never been higher, and the pressure weighed heavily on every one of us. The Zhorans had underestimated us before, but now they were ready. They had been anticipating our attack for months, preparing for this moment. They had fortified their position, deployed more advanced technology, and surrounded themselves with the full might of their military forces. There was no going back now. This was our last chance to take back our planet, to prove that humanity would not be easily broken. We had gathered all the resistance groups we could, joining forces in a desperate attempt to reclaim control of Earth. The battlefront was spread across multiple cities, each one holding its own significance. But the most crucial location was the Zhoran Command Center, the heart of their operation. If we could take it down, we could cripple their entire military strategy, disrupt their control, and give humanity a fighting chance. It was a mission that carried the weight of the world. The Zhorans had fortified the command center with layers of defense, both physical and technological. The skies above were filled with their ships, hovering like dark clouds, watching our every move. Their drones patrolled every street, scanning for any sign of resistance. But we knew we couldn't waste any more time. If we hesitated, we would lose everything. Our forces moved forward, the sound of boots pounding the ground echoing in the silence of the night. As we approached the command center, the full scale of the Zhorans' power became clear. The building loomed ahead, a towering structure of alien metal and strange, glowing lights. It was a fortress, nearly impenetrable. But we had no choice. The resistance had planted explosives around the facility's outer walls, and with a single signal, the battle would begin. The explosion shook the ground beneath us. The outer defenses crumbled, and we stormed in, armed with weapons we had scavenged from the Zhorans themselves. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning metal. Our comrades fought fiercely, pushing back the Zhoran soldiers who had been stationed there. But the alien forces were relentless. They fought with precision and intelligence, anticipating our every move. It felt as though they were always one step ahead, like they knew exactly what we were going to do before we did it. The Zhorans had studied us too well, and their strategy was flawless. Despite the odds, we kept pushing forward. The sound of gunfire and explosions filled the air as we fought our way through the corridors. The walls were lined with strange, alien technology, pulsating with energy that made my skin crawl. Every corner we turned, we encountered more resistance, more obstacles. The Zhorans weren't just fighting for control, they were fighting to break our spirit, to show us that we were powerless against them. But we wouldn't give in. We couldn't afford to. As we neared the heart of the command center, the battle grew even fiercer. Zhoran soldiers poured in from every direction, their advanced weapons lighting up the dark hallways. But we fought back with everything we had. Each step was hard-earned, each victory fleeting. We were losing men, but we couldn't stop. We had to keep going. The future of Earth depended on it. Finally, we reached the central control room. The Zhoran leader, Zaltor, stood there, waiting for us. His cold eyes studied us, calculating. He knew this was the end. He knew this was the end. He knew that if we succeeded, the Zhorans would lose their grip on Earth. The battle was reaching its climax, and every move from here on would be critical. Zaltor raised his weapon, and for a moment, it seemed as though the world held its breath. The final stand had begun. The last remnants of humanity's will to survive were focused on this single moment. We fought with everything we had, pushing past the fear and exhaustion, knowing that the fate of our world rested on the outcome. In the end, it wasn't just about defeating the Zhorans. It was about proving that humanity would not bow to an invader, no matter how powerful they were. It was about showing them that we would fight for our right to live, to be free. And when the final blow was struck, when the Zhorans finally retreated, it wasn't just the end of their occupation, it was the beginning of a new chapter for Earth. We had won. And though the cost was high, the price of freedom had never been more worth it. Earth was ours, and we would defend it at all costs. The Zhorans had underestimated us, but now they knew the truth: humanity would never be broken. We were a force to be reckoned with.